G'day and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be going through a new document that I was working with Fable5, the Claude AI, feeding it my previous attack and defense documents to come up with a more consolidated approach. And we have calculating Pokemon ratios. So in this article, we will investigate the ratio, the single number that the previous attack and defense documents were both secretly about. We'll answer the questions: the ratio, what is it? Same stats, same damage, different position. Distance is multiplicative, not additive. Breakpoints belong to the ratio. The attacker's leverage, the defender's leverage. Generic targets is above average enough. And the conclusion. Now, as always, you can follow along at home if you want to learn and develop some Python skills. You will need some bash type terminal with Python installed. I run with Anaconda. And then you also need a notepad. Again, I just use Notepad++ because it's good for Python formatting. First question, the ratio. What is it? So if you strip every modifier out of the damage formulator, stab, effectiveness, item, weather, what remains is just the core calculation, which is this level modifier, which will always equal 22 at level 50. And then this damage calculated, which is the level modifier, base power, attack divided by defense, divided by 50 plus 2. So the attack stat and the defense stat never appear on their own. They only ever appear as attack stat over def stat, the ratio. The formula cannot tell the difference between an attack of 110 hitting a defense of 110 and an attack of 220 hitting a defense of 220. Both are ratio 1 and both produce identical damage. And you can see this in this Python code here. So you can see we're calculating the stat, we're calculating the damage, and the damage between these two, 90 versus 90 and 200 versus 200. So if we were to pop that in there and then open up and then run our code, you can see the damage. We're printing the damage if the stat is 90-90 and printing the damage if the stat is 200 and 200. Both lines print 37. So a base stat of 90 against a base stat of 90 deals exactly the same damage as 200 against 200. It is important to note the previous two documents presented attack breakpoints and defense benchmarks as if they were properties of your own stat. They're not. Every breakpoint, every gap, every diminishing return identified in those documents is a property of the ratio and therefore of the matchup, not of either Pokemon alone. It's to have that differentiation. So if it's the same stats, same damage, it's to do with different positions. So again, using the example, if 90 versus 90 and 200 versus 200 deal identical damage, are the two situations equivalent? And the answer is no. And that is the most important idea in this document, that the damage is the same today, but the two matchups respond completely different to investment. So at level 50, every SP adds a fixed +1 to the final stat. A fixed addition moves the ratio further when the numbers involved are small. So you've got the 90 versus 90, stats are 100 versus 100. +32 attack SP moves the ratio from 1 to 1.29. Compared to that same difference at 200 versus 200, again, the same 32 SP moves the ratio from 1 to 1.5. And you can see this plotted on a graph. So again, if you want to go through this just fixed variables, again, calculating the stat, doing the different points, and then we're plotting this on a graph. So we can dump that into there and we can run this and we get our same investment, different leverage. So identical +32 moves the ratio twice as far at low magnitudes. So again, you can see our 90, 90, 90, we get our 1.29. and our 200, 200, and he gets our 1.15. And that kind of where we look at, diminishing returns at higher numbers, not as effective. So yeah, if you just want the graph, that's posted in there. So every point on the same line through the origin deals the same damage. Investment moves a fixed vertical distance, which crosses far more damage lines at the bottom left of the chart than it does at the top right. The low magnitude matchups are elastic, high magnitude matchups are stiff. Identical damage, very different leverage. This is where we talk about the distance is multiplicative, not additive. It is tempting to think of offense and defense as distancing the values, getting your stat as far above or below the opponent's as possible. And the instinct is right, but the distance that matters is multiplicative, not additive. So a 20 plus gap is not worth a fixed amount. So again, we've got our defense 100 versus attack 90. So the ratio is 0.82. You take roughly 18% less than at parity. Compared to 220 versus attack 200, the ratio is 0.9. So it's that same 20-point gap, but it now only serves you as half as much because, you're only 9% less than at parity. So the correct mental model, your goal as an attacker is to maximize attack stat over def stat. Your goal as defender is to minimize it. So gaps in raw points are only meaningful relative to the size of the stats they sit between. This is also why percentage comparisons, plus 32 is 29% increase on 110, but only 15% at 220, kept appearing in the previous documents because the percentages are just the ratio wearing a disguise. Breakpoints belong to the ratio. So damage steps up by one tier every time your 22 times base power times ratio divided by 50 crosses an integer. So solve for the ratio and the entire breakpoint machinery of the previous two documents collapses into one line, which is your tier width 50 divided by 22 times base power, and that's the ratio change needed for one damage. So the single table replaces every matchup specific SP table at base power of 80. Any change from your SPs, their SPs, natures or stat changes, stat stages that shift the ratio by 2.84% produces a new damage value. Higher base power moves have narrower tiers, which is the real reason the attack document found that higher base power rewards investment more. The same ratio crosses more boundaries. So again, there's another graph here which you can run, and we run that. That gives us our base damage is a function of the ratio only. So again, you can see, I think it's over there. So base power 40, it tiers slowly compared to base power 80. And then obviously, if we're all running base power 120s, it just skyrockets. So the steps are perfectly regular in ratio size. The irregular, lumpy SP tables in previous documents were the same regular staircase viewed through the distortion of a specific defender's stats. So again, this is kind of taking that step back, doing a little bit more agnostic view, just specific to the attack stat, def stat ratio. Let's talk about the attacker's leverage. So each SP adds +1 to your attack stat. So it shifts the ratio by 1 divided by def stat, a quantity that depends only on the opponent. Combine this with the tier width above, and the number of damage tiers gained from full investment is visible via this block here. So I'll get rid of our previous. So again, running that. So I've got the output. So the opponent's def stat. So we're just picking ranges. We've got 60, 100, 130, 180, 240. And then damage tiers from 32 SPs. So we're just going to stick with our base power 80. And so at 60 plus 32, frail. Every SP lands. At 100, across the range of 32, you get high leverage, 130 defense stat, plus 8, you can see it decreasing. So this is the Tyranitar, which matches the attack document, which I'll have that video linked at the end. 180 defense stat, leverage starts fading. And then at 240, half your SPs are wasted on floor. And this goes for, the Mega Aggron, Steelix, anything that has a massive defense stat. Investing further, it just becomes harder and harder to yield return because of the ratio. And again, we've got another graph here. If you love graphs, and you can see that renders here. So again, this is that attack leverage, and I'm blocking a little bit of it. So I'll do something like this. So again, damage tiers gained from the full 32 investment against each of the tiers. And again, you can see those, you got base power 40 down the bottom, base power 80, and your base power 120 at the top. So again, that all consolidates and starts getting slow. Once you hit, more effective at 50, less effective at 100, and then at each point it becomes less and less effective. So this is why the attack document found superior as an example, and Mega Gengar gaining almost identical absolute damage, 12.8.5 over 12.87 from the same investment against the same defender pool. The absolute value of attacker SPs is set by the opposition, and only the percentage gain differs because the baselines differ. Then we'll talk about the defender's leverage. So defense sits in the denominator, so it behaves differently. The damage saved by one additional defense point is approximately, and we can run this, and that's the value per def point is the 22 level modifier times the base power times the attack stat divided by 50 times def stat squared. So if we grab this and put it in, we can see that again, an error in that because I missed that. So again, you can see here, the def stat squared term is the key. A defense point is worth more when your defense is low relative to the incoming attack and worth more at low magnitudes generally. So again, at that 1-to-1 ratio, if you're adding an extra point, you can save 0.32 damage compared to at higher values, you're saving half. And then, if you're 130 versus 150, then your ratio is, 8.7. Then you're gaining obviously somewhere in between, compared to even at, significantly. So if you're, already 240, or, already 40 above or above in that high 200 range, investing an extra 32, is not going to get you significant damage gains. It might be the difference in a specific scenario, but again, if you're just going at it generically, this is the where you get more bang for your buck. So again, if you're reading the first two rows, identical ratio, identical damage, but the 110 defender gets exactly twice the damage reduction per point invested compared to a higher number. This is the precise quantified answer to is 90 versus 90 the same as 200 versus 200. The damage is the same. It's just the value of your next SP is not. So again, we've got a graph here that can be rendered with Python. And again, this shows the defender leverage falls off faster at higher magnitudes. And then, defense saved per defense point. So obviously, anything under 50 or 100. And this kind of answers the question as also at what point do you invest in hit points over defense? Again, at low numbers, until you start, not reducing the damage by 1, that's when you then convert to investing in hit points. But again, as you get even higher and higher into defense, becomes less and less impactful So this asymmetry, attacker value linear to the ratio, defender value scaling with 1 over def stat squared, is why the defender also has HP as a second lever and the attacker has nothing equivalent. HP adds survivability at a constant 1 hit point per SP, regardless of magnitude, making it the stabilizer when the defense leverage runs out. Generic targets is above average enough. Base stats run 1 to 255, so aim above average sounds like a sensible generic rule. And as a first approximation, it is, against an unknown opponent drawn from the full range, every point of ratio in your favor helps. But the analysis above sharpens it into 3 practical rules. So your percentile matters, not your number. A 90 stat in a metagame of 90 is parity. A 90 is, a 90 in a metagame of 130s is a bit of a liability. Profile your stats you actually face before deciding a stat is good. And again, given the current meta at the moment, we've got megas. Megas have a different, a higher typical range than the remaining Pokemon. So again, that's where that, your percentile matters, not just the value. Investment buys more at the bottom. SPs added to or against small stats move the ratio furthest. The lower the relevant magnitudes in your matchups, the more a single SP swings the outcome in both directions. Modifiers move the ratio too, so don't forget a -2 defense drop multiplies the opponent's stat by 0.5, doubling the ratio in one turn, equivalent to an SP investment no stat page could ever hold. So, items and abilities that multiply damage stack on top of the ratio rather than shifting it, which is why breakpoints, survive underneath them. So, in conclusion, the previous 2 documents asked how much attack, how much defense, and produce answers that were quietly chained to one specific opponent. The honest unit of analysis was the ratio all along. So the key takeaways: base damage is a function of attack stat over def stat and nothing else. Equal stats deal equal damage at any magnitude. Equal damage is not equal position. Fixed SPs additions move the ratio further at lower magnitudes, so low stat matchups are more elastic and higher matchups are a bit stiff. So breakpoints are regular in ratio space. 1 new damage per, 50 over 22 times base power of ratio, and every lumpy SP table and that staircase we viewed before through one defender's stats. Attacker SP value is set by the opponent's stat. Defender SP values scale with the 1 over def stat squared. The two sides of the ratio are not symmetric. Again, you're dealing with denominators and numerators. Distance the values is the right instinct, stated in the wrong units. So maximize or minimize the ratio and measure all gaps multiplicatively. Whether you crunch specific matchups, target ratio benchmarks against your local metagame, or simply remember that the formula only ever sees one number, the choice is always yours. So whether you're reading this to learn about Pokemon stats or Python, I hope you have enjoyed it. If you haven't visited the website, check it out. We've got the link there and it'll be in the description below. If you'd like to provide any feedback, comments, or suggestions, again, leave them in the comments below. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and I appreciate your support. Otherwise, until then, take care and enjoy. Thank you.